with El Profe Cortez, and on Saturdays featuring bands, mariachis, DJs live. Don't miss it. Find us on Simple Radio app and TuneIn app and all social media. TVOSJ.org, the voice of San Joaquin.
For more information on the Voice of San Joaquin, go to tvosj.org.
Welcome to TVOSJ, the voice of San Joaquin. Now it is time for Connections, Peace and Justice Network.
Good evening. Thank you for doing the board, Betty. It's really wonderful to see you again. And this evening, we're going to be talking about climate action, the Climate Action Coalition. And we have with us two experts on climate change and how important it is to us to get started on working on that issue as quickly as possible. We have Susan Schreider and Margo Praus, who are both local activists in environmental issues. But tonight we're going to be talking about climate change because it is like it's the big thing. It's the elephant in the room. So thank you for coming on this evening.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Well, we were going to be talking about an event that was happening on February 29th, which has now been postponed, but we can talk about it still and just have a longer lead time because it's just been postponed. It's not been canceled. But what we were going to be seeing on the 29th was a film on, well, you can explain it to me.
We were looking to bring, people were asking for a film that had solutions. And so we were bringing a film called Ice on Fire. Came out this year, came out in 2019, produced by Leonardo DiCaprio. And it focuses on seeking solutions. So it actually focuses on some new technological solutions that are out there and such. And what we were hoping for was to have a discussion.
Yeah.
Have a community discussion after the film to talk about what we need to do here in this locale, how we can encourage our leaders to really look for change, because this is a crisis. It's a crisis. It's an emergency, and and we're not working on it. We're hardly even talking about it.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
I think in the Democratic debates, when there were people who were pushing to have just a specific night where they just talked about climate change as the main topic, and it was shot down by the National Committee because I guess people thought it was, there's so many other issues that they could talk about, but this is the defining moment for us. Susan, what was your take on this film?
Right. Yeah, on the film or on the debate?
On the film and the debate, because there was going to be a discussion after the film, right? There was going to be a community discussion.
Absolutely. And 2 years ago, we had a climate change event with speakers and discussion. So it's time to do that again. I agree. It's good that the Democratic candidates all acknowledge that we do have a climate crisis and want to do something about it. There was a debate last year that was not on TV, though, right? And it was
like a one-on-one type of thing, right?
Yeah, it was different. So at least they gave that much of a nod to the importance of bringing this forward. But some candidates, of course, more than others, focusing on it.
Yeah. But as Margo mentioned, even if people might be talking about it, but it's not being heard. It's not like it's being promoted. It's not like it's the topic that is is driving the debate. I mean, it should be this is, for me, it's healthcare and this, and this is actually more existential than, I mean, sooner or later, at some point, we're going to have a single payer system, whether you want it or not, because what we have now is just unsustainable. But the thing is that in terms of climate change, if we don't respond to this, sooner or later, we're going to have a warmer planet. It just depends on how warm and how quickly, and whether or not animals and we are going to be able to adapt to it. The thing that was going to be nice about this show being on February 29th is that 3 days later on Tuesday is the primary.
Yes. And
the primary election. And so if people wanted to take into the ballot box an understanding of what their candidates were, where their stance was in terms of how important climate change is going to be, that would have been an informative debate. But I think it's an ongoing debate, and so we'll just have to keep on getting the word out to people.
And I think what I've asked people to in the past is to talk about it. Just talk about it. Right before Thanksgiving, we hosted a film on climate change that was called The Human Element. Mm-hmm. And these days I always show a little 5-minute clip of Greta Thunberg. Yeah. Yeah. With her the forcefulness of her ask that we do something.
Yeah.
And my point was,
well, The Human Element. What was that film about? Was that different than how different was it, and what was it about?
One of the things about climate films has mostly been showing us what the problem is. And that particular film was done by the same cinematographer that did Chasing Ice. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen that one. And it's amazing cinematography, beautifully done. It focused on the 4 elements: earth, fire, wind, water, all of which are being affected by climate change. And then humans are another element. So it was called The Human Element as being the impetus behind many of our problems. It did not focus on solutions. Other than we need to change what we're doing.
Right.
And it showed what the damage is being done. And
well, it is important for people to have an awareness of the problem. I mean, and there are still people who have a bottom line profit in keeping the situation the way it is. And so those folks are definitely going to be deniers, or say, we can put this off, we can kick this can down the road, we don't really have to do anything right now about this situation. But the rest of us, especially the younger folks amongst us, are more concerned about the long-term consequences of continuing down this path. And so we do have, the path that we're on is, every day we see disasters. Right now, an entire continent is on fire. Australia, I guess it's off the news. I don't know if it's just because it's not news anymore, if it's stopped burning, but that's the attention span of people are saying, well, I just can only handle so much bad news in any given week, and so then we have to go to some other piece of bad news. But still, these are all symptoms of the same disease.
Yeah, it's here. It's been here. People are dying. People are being displaced. Ecosystems are being disrupted. Another recent news item that Antarctica, on the Antarctic Peninsula, recently had the highest temperature in their history. It was a higher temperature than in New Mexico on that day.
It was 65. I heard it was 65 degrees.
Yeah.
And so that means, I think the high predicted tomorrow, at least where I live, is 63. So actually in Antarctica, it was warmer than it is in Valley Springs or in Stockton, even for that matter. And of course, it's summertime, so you expect it to be really warm, balmy, in fact, down in Antarctica. But it's really serious. It is. I've heard that some of these the like presidential winners like Rush Limbaugh, Medal of Freedom Award, Rush Limbaugh says the thing is the ice sheets melt, I mean, the water level's not going to go up in the same way that a ice cube, when it melts, the water level doesn't go up. But Antarctica and Greenland, they're continents.
Exactly.
That water is on top of land.
Yeah.
And so when that stuff gets into the water supply, not only that, it's going to put a ton of fresh water into the oceans. And that's going to change the jet stream, and that's going to change the Gulf Stream, I should say, And so, in terms of whether or not Europe gets colder, because the Gulf Stream is going to be weakened, and so the warmth of anyway, there are just so many consequences.
Yes.
That I think a lot of people just can't grasp.
Yes. In one way, it's wonderful that there's so many ways we can make a dent in greenhouse gas emissions, because we're not limited to just one. There's so many ways that we can make a difference as we try and meet the IPCC goal of cutting global greenhouse gas emissions in half in just 10 years, and ultimately reaching net zero by 2050. But on the other hand, that's a curse, because everyone thinks, well, someone else can do it. I don't need to, because there are all these different ways that we can meet, particularly the 10-year goal. I know we can do it, and so we can always do it. We'll just kick the can down the road. We'll just vote in somebody who just, who thinks, we don't have to really make any drastic change. We'll just sort of, we'll just increase the mileage on the car, maybe 10 miles per gallon. And before we get into some solutions, I just wanted to sort of plug what is in connections, your recent connections this month, which is the voter issue, and it talks about there's some discussion there of where politicians stand on climate change. But on your page 13, you'll see that discussing that this last decade was the hottest decade in record, which is not surprising, and a lot of people who have been paying attention will know that, but if you haven't been, then that's kind of an interesting article. And then also, there were some people when there was a trade agreement that was signed by Trump just last week or the week before, the revision of the NAFTA agreement. And so there were some politicians or some senators who voted against that treaty, primarily because there was no mention of climate change in that trade agreement. And that there was, at a time like this, when you're talking about international trade, if you're not talking about the impacts that trade has on the countries that are both exporting and importing goods, and the impact that has on climate change, it should be a non-starter. I mean, that should be the foundation of just about every trade agreement that we have going forward. And I don't think that'll happen with this administration, but maybe in future administrations. Let's hope so.
Yeah. And then also on the facing page, on page 12, it talks about the horrible destruction that's happening in Australia in terms of a billion animals that are perishing. A lot of those species are endemic to Australia, and so if they're gone, they're not coming back. That's like extinction is forever. And so you can talk about, well, Medicare, we just Medicare for all. Maybe we have to pay a little bit more for that appendectomy or something. But if a koala bear is gone or koala is gone, it's not coming back. And so these are things that it just betrays a real lack of appreciation for biological diversity, just to say, well, it's just a koala, it's just a platypus, it's just a wallaby, what the heck, I mean, these are real life consequences that are things that we should just be marveling at, and we're just thinking that, I just can't handle that much change in 1 year. I just can't deal with getting off of fossil fuels.
Yeah,
and we've been saying that for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, decades.
The first Earth Day, that's what it was all about, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of pollution involved too.
There was a lot.
There was a lot of water pollution. The Lake Erie catching fire, or the Cuyahoga River, and also the horrible air pollution that was happening down in L.A. Yeah. But in terms of the greenhouse effect, which became global warming, which is now climate change, is that was back when we had our first Earth Day in 1980, in the one in Stockton in 1989, at least the incarnation we have now. I mean, James Hansen was talking about the greenhouse effect back then. If I go back and look in in a Connections from 1986. One of the articles was talking about the greenhouse effect and how it was going to impact temperatures. And that was what, 86? They didn't carry the one. That's like 34 years ago. You know, that's a long time, you know, for us to be talking about the same problem.
In the 1980s, it really became so clear.
Yeah.
The climate scientists reached a consensus. That Nathaniel Rich had a book that came out last year called Losing Earth, A Recent History, showing that we came very close to an international agreement on climate change that had bipartisan support in this country as well as, of course, international support. Because the science was clear. Even the fossil fuel lobby was on board for a while. It didn't last.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, right now we're saying, well, you know, we can't stand. I mean, I've looked at the different, the Green New Deal offerings that the Democrats have that they have to bring forward, and I'm really impressed. I mean, the one that's most impressive by far is Bernie Sanders, because it is just the most revolutionary. It really tackles, just like anything he takes on, he just looks at the problem and says, this is how we're going to solve it. And the reason why it may look like it is really revolutionary, it's because we've waited 30 years, we've waited 35 years to get to this point. Of course, I mean, it's sort of like if your shower is plugged up and then the water is, you know, up to your knees. Well, maybe it would have been better if you had worked on it when it was around your toes. You know, and now it's up to your knees, and now there has to be some major plumbing work to catch up. And it's not that it's not, I mean, and scientists aren't saying that it's irreversible, but what they're saying is that, you know, if whatever happens has to happen soon, and it has to be serious. It can't just be kicking the can down the road.
Right.
Yeah, that 50
has to be huge.
That 50% cut globally in greenhouse gas emissions in 10 years. I think that's the one we need to be focusing on now, and to point out that we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I mean, some states, like California, in fact, are doing reasonably well at heading in the right direction. And look at Europe. Western Europe is way ahead of us, much lower per capita greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, you know, and you know, people would ask me of you know, being a Bernie supporter, well, what do you do about foreign policy? You know, what's happening there? We'll say, you know, we all have a common enemy. We all have a common situation that we all have to work together to deal with. And rather than fighting over and bombing each other and bombing, you know, destroying buildings, why don't we all gather together? And it doesn't even have to be a kumbaya moment. What we're talking about is our saving our butts moment, and make certain that we all are pulling in the same direction, that we support tree plantings in less developed countries, that we don't support countries that you know, export tons of oil, that we move towards sustainable energy production, and really negotiate trade agreements that have environmental floors that people are not allowed to go below.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the reason why companies go into China to produce isn't because they like the climate. It's because they have weak environmental laws and they have cheap labor. And so the thing is that, you know, those evil Chinese. Well, no, it's the corporations that are chasing a quick buck. You know, they're trying to make money off stealing our common heritage of our environment. And it's just, I mean, and the thing is that I think that's sort of those ideas are new to some people.
We are seeing some public pressure, and some of the major corporations at least going in the right direction towards sustainability. If we had more metrics and accountability, some of these disinvestment movements are helping. Will it be enough fast enough?
Well, there has to be some leadership, you know, and so we were talking at our Earth Day meeting this evening. We are meeting every well, let's see, tonight is the 10th. And so on the 17th, we're going to take a day off for President's Day. But on the 24th, we're going to start again every Monday night here at the center, 231 Bedford Road, from 6:30 to 7:30. We're organizing our Earth Day Festival, 32nd annual. And the theme is Climate Action Now, Vote Earth. And so what we're talking about is climate action now, because that is, and it's CAN, can. How about that? And so anyway, so we're getting all ready for that day. And that again is going to be April 26th out at Victory Park from 10 to 4. You guys always participate, and you'll be out there with your booths and stuff. And we'll have great entertainment and great vegetarian food. And the reason why we have vegetarian food is to eat lower on the food chain to impact the environment better. And so, but anyway, hopefully the ideas that you'll get from there would be positive action types of things on how we can impact the environment. And so it's climate action now, vote Earth. And so if there is one election where you vote for the environment, this would be the one.
Yeah.
This would be the one.
Yes, it is.
Yes, because at this point, we are getting to the point where we're running out of time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young people realize that. Greta and just look at a lot of young folks who you would think would be very sad or pessimistic or worried or whatever, but I think they're energized. I think they see that there's an opportunity here to really save this planet.
Yeah. And it's such an environmental justice issue, too, because people in developing nations are already suffering disproportionately, even though they did not cause this problem.
That's right.
All the flooding in Bangladesh, for example, is often given as an example.
That's right. Yeah, any of the extreme weather events that have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, or droughts that are happening in continent and African continent
and the Middle East.
Yeah.
I mean, this contributed to the Syrian conflict that has such devastating consequences.
Yeah, and if in a lot of cases, the climate is just sort of it's sort of the stimulus for a lot of bad things happening. And we fuel it. I mean, the thing is right now we currently do subsidize oil production. We are the number one oil exporter, number one oil producer in the world, and primarily because we're polluting our water by fracking the oil fields, and it's purely so that we can burn more oil. It's purely so that oil companies can make more money.
Yeah.
And to think that we don't have the resources to be able to move in a different direction is to ignore the record increases in military spending and the record tax cuts that we just gave to well-off people by borrowing. I mean, we borrowed money to give those tax cuts. Yeah. The deficit wasn't zero before we gave those tax cuts, and now the deficits are bigger.
Huge.
That means that that those tax cuts were borrowed. Yeah. And why? Why are we borrowing money to give rich people more money?
Exactly.
And to give to give more subsidies to oil companies and to pour into our military machine. Yeah. I guess it's so that we can't make so there's an argument to not invest in sustainable energy. The whole argument has got to change. I mean, it's just so upside down.
Yeah.
Well, and when you roll back, current regulations are saying the car mileage has to be so much, and now we're rolling that back and making it less. So it kind of mind-boggling as to where we really are.
Yeah.
Because the auto industry was moving forward with it. It's like,
right. Well, and then what? The federal government is suing the state of California because somehow it's sponsoring monopoly collusion or something amongst these car companies that wanted to produce. They wanted to produce the higher mileage cars, but the federal government is actually keeping them from doing that to adhere to the California model. Yeah. You just feel like it's a last gasp type of effort here. There's trying to grab as much as they possibly can before the show collapses on top of them.
And it's hard for us to understand who do see the serious consequences already and how much worse it's going to get, but there's huge amounts of money at stake.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, and that's where people throw their hands up and say, well, we can't do anything. I mean, these politicians, they're just, I guess they know what they're doing, and I guess we're just stuck in this situation, so we have to sort of muddle around the edges. It's like these are a lot of these rules, or all of the rules, are man-made. I mean, we can change them.
Yeah.
It's like when people say, "Oh, well, Social Security is going to go broke in 3 decades." Well, not if we don't let it. All we have to do is raise the tax. All you have to do is change the law.
Yeah.
It's not like these things are natural events. The hurricane's coming. Well, yeah, you're not going to stop that. But that's different. I mean, it's like I guess those car rules. I mean, we just can't seem to get above 50 miles per gallon. But I keep on saying 20 years ago, maybe it was 30 years ago, I had a Geo Metro that got 50 miles per gallon with a 3-cylinder car, and that cost $7,000. That car did.
Yeah.
And now to buy the same car that gets 50 miles per gallon, you have to pay $25,000-$30,000. Why is that? And you have to buy it with a hybrid battery that is going to be difficult to dispose of when the thing is over. Why can't we go back to building 3-cylinder cars that people can just commute in? It's not like the technology doesn't exist.
And electric cars, of course, overall with the life cycle analysis, really are the way to go. I think it's in Norway, where half of their fleet now is electric cars, maybe even more.
Yeah, well, you look at City of Stockton or RTD.
Yeah.
We have electric buses now. I mean, there is a movement. I think because a lot of businesses are seeing that that's the way to go.
Yes.
And that's the way we're going.
And with our air pollution problem in the valley, especially.
Yeah. Now, of course, energy. I mean, electric energy isn't free. It's not produced out of nothing. So the thing is there are clean ways to produce electric energy, and there are dirty ways to produce electric. I mean, if you had a coal-fired plant and to produce energy, that may be a dirtier way to go than natural gas, or if you have, like, say, wind power, or if you have hydro. But then, of course, there's all sorts of environmental problems with wind. There's dead birds. And
so few.
I know.
Yeah,
But the thing is,
Audubon,
and yeah, right, yeah.
It has come out, in support of wind energy, appropriate siting.
Yeah.
But when you look at the figures,
Yeah.
it's just tiny compared to like the
Yeah.
numbers killed by window strikes and feral
Yeah,
cats.
and then you can have the anecdote where somebody's holding up a dead golden eagle and say, here's here's this thing, and say, how can you how can you support this?
Right.
And it's like, well, there's that could be mitigated. But also the thing is, in terms of solar power, if we're talking about panels and photovoltaics and having, what was it, a million roof thing that Schwarzenegger was talking about, where every roof was going to be solar panels. I think new construction does have to have solar panels.
It does have to now.
Right.
Is that a state?
In California,
it's
state.
New construction. And so, but the thing is that solar panels, the production of those things isn't necessarily the cleanest process either. No. But those are these things. These issues can be mitigated.
Yes.
There can be production methods that become more and more clean.
Yes.
And where the toxic waste can be recycled and reused, and so the ingenuity that is there. It's just whether or not the economics is there.
And of course, if we set up the incentives right.
Yeah, and cut the subsidies for oil.
Exactly,
Right.
Which dwarf the subsidies for renewable sources.
That's right. Yeah, because there is big money behind the oil companies and the car companies and the trucking companies, and how am I going to replace my diesel engine? Are you going to help me put another $100,000 in there for my new engine? Well, let's work on that. The thing is, what you do, you set out a goal, and then you achieve it.
And you need to start.
Yes.
You need to get there.
Yes, you got to start somewhere. And so we should have started yesterday. So anyway, so I see you have a climate revolution book, A Parent's Guide to the Climate Revolution. What's this about?
Where's
Yes.
the camera?
I want to. Okay.
I don't know where it is. Anyway,
There we go. You take
right
it.
there. I got it.
I want to highlight this book, which has been receiving high praise from organizations like Sierra Club, Yale Climate Connections, etc. It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
It's very hopeful. It's got wonderful suggestions. It's not just for parents. It's inspiring. It's positive. It's comprehensive. It's an incredibly powerful book that I recommend everyone who cares at all about this planet and the people on it and the animals take a look at, because you are bound to find some useful suggestions and some inspiration.
It's by Mary DeMacher. She's the co-founder and creative director of 350.org's Eugene, Oregon chapter. She's written other books, and there's some really nice things that are being said by Bill McKibben, among other folks. So check it out.
And it's positive, and it's funny. How could climate change be funny? She makes it funny.
Very nice. Yeah.
We need that to keep going. It does get, challenging against all of the barriers.
Yeah. So anyway, Climate Action Coalition. What is Climate Action Coalition doing these days? So what is San Joaquin County Climate Action Coalition anyway?
We're a group of organizations. Susan was with Audubon. I was with Sierra Club.
Mm-hmm.
We have League of Women Voters involved. Peace and Justice is part of our coalition.
Right.
Citizens Climate Lobby.
Yeah.
Citizens Climate
we're
Lobby.
Both
Which you're both, yeah.
and you're a leader of that one too. Yes.
Right. Which that particular group looks at a carbon. Asking Congress to initiate a carbon tax with the dividend returned to the people. They really believe that model could be bipartisan.
So how does that work?
That would be an annually increasing tax imposed on fossil fuels at the source. So whether it's gas or coal or oil, it would be at the mine. They would be, it's already calculated how much CO2 this particular amount of fossil fuel would produce, and they would be charged
A certain amount per barrel or something like that?
Pardon?
A certain amount per barrel of
Right,
oil like that
it's
sort
by
of thing?
the amount, yes. And it would be charged at the source. Now, we know that will be turned into us paying for it at the pump.
Right.
But this money would not be kept by the government, which in theory should appeal to people who don't want larger government, and it would be returned to the people.
And so would it be returned to the people in terms of either would it be directly through some sort of rebate, or would it go in terms of investing in sustainable energy programs, that sort of thing?
Well, that's a debate that goes on. The design that Citizens Climate Lobby has is that it would be returned to the people to somewhat compensate them for the extra money they might be paying at the pump. At the same time, the goal is to, because it's a continually increasing fee, at some point people do see the light, and the next time they buy their next automobile, it'll be time for a transition.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what we'd like to see. If climate change bills are put forward, we will review them and see if we can get behind them. And I know some people are looking at some dividend, but some money kept for research. But the climate lobby itself looks at those two separately. But we all know how bills happen.
Right.
It's a messy process.
Right.
They go through debates and they figure out what they want to do going forward. But
well, California is a leader. I mean, California, in terms of its goals for reducing emissions, is it's a target for the Trump administration. There's some very upset fossil fuel folks who don't like the fact that California set out that goal. What I think is 20% fewer emissions by 2030 or something. I don't know. It was quite an aggressive goal to address climate change, and so California can be out there, but we are in an election year, and it's important for you to find out where your representative, where the person who you are electing, where they stand on climate change action. And it's not just the top of the ticket. It's not just the president. I mean, for better or for worse, our two senators are not going to be on the ballot, Harris and Feinstein. But that doesn't mean, just because they're not on the ballot and just because they're Democrats, doesn't necessarily mean that they are for strong climate change legislation. Dianne Feinstein is fairly conservative when it comes to a lot of issues, and on climate change, she's not for as strong climate change as what is needed. So even after the election, even now, although any legislation nothing's getting passed by the Senate, but next year when there is climate change legislation before the Senate, we're all going to have to make certain that we let our legislators know that this is the most important issue. This is a existential issue, and bring that out to not. And I think California has done a pretty good job, but federally, we have to talk to McNerney, talk to Harder, talk to any of those, whoever's still in the House, and make certain that really strong legislation gets out there. Really strong trade deals, really strong things that where we collectively can have an impact.
Yes.
Well, and we're really hoping, on the 29th, one of the things we wanted to bring up with the community when we're talking about solutions was many municipalities and county governments are passing climate emergency resolutions. And it's just such an important thing, even though a municipality can't legislate a carbon fee like the federal government could. There are things it can do. There are stands it can take, and it's time to look at this as an emergency and actually move forward because it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And Sacramento recently adopted a climate emergency declaration.
Wow.
Where they look at the next 5 to 10 years, and if things haven't turned around, we don't know.
Okay.
And I just want to mention, too, this is not part of what we're doing as a group, but Stockton was just awarded a California Air Resources Board grant to look at, it's geared towards Southwest Stockton. It's based on AB 617. You heard of it?
That's like Western Ranch area?
Well, it's actually more than that. It encompasses the whole area around the port.
Okay.
And borders just north of Western Ranch, so just where that little waterway is thing. But it goes all the way to Harding,
Boggs Tract,
all the areas. Pardon?
Rough and Ready Island?
Yeah, yes, and the port is supposed to be very involved. The goal of because it's from the Air Resources Board, and it's looking at disadvantaged communities as well. They're right now forming their steering committee, because it's a steering committee that of residents and employers and employees that work in the area who will decide how they're going to spend the money. Fresno and Shafter were the two cities that were granted monies last year, and this year Stockton received the award. So so it's pretty exciting.
So who's on that committee? Is it a something that you could sign up for, something you could ask the city about, or is it already people have already been selected to? Well,
they were getting the word out. I don't know if I'm on the committee because I live in that area. So I was like, I assume I'm on the committee. I haven't heard officially.
So was that just recently?
It was just recently. It was awarded in December. They had their first meeting late January, and the applications were there, and they wanted them turned in. Hopefully this moves very quickly. It's not sure how much it can do. It's Stockton's being awarded $14 million.
Wow.
But it's a huge issue, and the port area, all the freeways that are involved in the area that pass right by some schools that are right there. The truck traffic is huge, and we'll see what comes of this. I mean, we're really hopeful, but it'll be interesting to see
Great.
what we can do.
This is Peace and Justice Connections. We're talking with Susan Schreider and Margo Praus about climate change. And so for one thing, I noticed that we could do things like plant trees. Is that something that would be? I mean, in a lot of less developed countries, and if we're talking about a global impact, of course, what we need to do is we need to have plants that are going to suck carbon dioxide out of the air, right, out of our atmosphere. And so replanting trees, especially in drought-stricken areas, is one thing. But also in an area like where we are now, I would think that maybe I don't know if tree planting would be something that could happen out there in that. With the $14 million you got, that's a lot of trees. But also it has to be a place where trees are, where they can grow. I don't know how high the water table is, out there.
Tree planting is one of our projects. It's also the project for many other groups in town.
Sure.
Puentes is working on it. Fathers and Families is working on it. And others.
Mm-hmm.
And there are trees, and there are people willing to plant them. Getting the location. I mean, you need the landowner to want to have the trees and to be willing to maintain. At this point in time, some of the stopping points have been if it's a city easement that the trees are being planted on, the city is somewhat averse still to taking on maintenance of trees.
Because of the water?
Because of manpower.
Financing, yeah.
Oh.
But this was discussed at the city council meeting last week, which I attended.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
In connection with the $14 million, or with it's just general tree planting?
This is actually in conjunction with our application for the TCC grant, the Transformative Climate Communities grant.
Okay.
Yes, which was approved to go ahead, and tree planting is a major element in that, including maintenance.
So who's giving out that grant? What is that, state money, or is that?
That's also cap and trade money.
I think it's cap and trade.
It's cap and trade money. Okay.
Exactly.
And is that money that's guaranteed the city? Or is that something you have to apply for and competitively get?
Yes, it's competitive, but we're competing with 5 other cities, and there's going to be 2 awards. So we have pretty good odds.
Yeah. And so the goal is to. So what was the proposal? What was the pitch? What sort of where were trees going to be planted, or just in Stockton in general, or with San Joaquin County, or?
This is for Stockton in particular. And I'm not sure if it's all of Stockton. It's most of Stockton, though. Right. And tree planting is just one element. There's environmental justice elements.
Yeah.
There's a lot of features that went into it. A variety of local nonprofits collaborated on
there's a lot of areas. I mean, trees are just pleasant. I mean, they cool us in the summertime, and also they just make a community feel a lot more homey, you know? I mean, if you drive down a street, and I don't know what Charter Way or MLK Street is, I haven't driven down that street in a long time, but I just remember that street was just barren of trees.
Mm-hmm.
And, you think of that, or you think of Pacific Avenue, or you think of Alpine, or you think of Mariposa, or some of the places that are just really charming places. And the reason why they're charming, I mean, some of the homes are nice, but it's really the trees, you know?
And they take in pollution as well.
Yeah.
Again, with our air pollution problem, they've got so many benefits. It's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
Although not everybody likes them. You do need maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, the leaves fall.
Leaves
right.
fall,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
But in general, there is a lot of support for that. And we just need to do it on a grand scale, because the Stockton area, like a lot of the rest of the Central Valley, lost a lot of trees during the drought, which coincided with our bankruptcy.
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, where I come from, I mean, fires, I mean, we had the Butte fire, but then, I mean, the other ones that were just majorly catastrophic up north, those trees are gone. And not only did they, when they burned, that they dumped a ton of carbon into the atmosphere, but now they're not there any longer, either to hold the soil or to capture any other CO2. And so in terms of tree plantings, I mean, if we're talking, about, having to change course like quickly, this is something, if rather than, I was listening to a radio article this morning on NPR, and they was going, the Navy, they had like, 275 ships, and they were shooting for 308 ships, and that was in their budget. But then when Trump got elected, he said he wanted 355 ships. So very quickly, they reshuffled their priorities, and by golly, they came up with a budget for 355 Navy ships. Because, if we're going to implement the type of control and military stuff that we're going to be doing overseas, we're going to need 355 ships. And who knows where Donald Trump came up with that number. I was probably, throwing a dart at a board. But the thing is that what we're doing is we are just coming up with ways to throw money away, when what we could be doing is for, I just wonder, all those planes that they're building, bombers or whatever, why can't those things be retrofitted so that the next time we have a catastrophic fire, that we don't just wait around for one of those planes every half hour to come and dump stuff? Why isn't it every 15 seconds? To really take care of it. I mean, if you can retrofit these,
Yeah.
if you have a mindset that says what's truly important. What truly is important is to keep the trees alive so that they keep on taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It doesn't require a biology degree to figure that out. It's just so highly annoying to see these folks who think that, it's perfectly fine to throw money away on the military, where, we can't even pinch a few pennies to try to keep fire suppression down or to plant a few trees.
Yeah, well, and if you task the military with that as an issue for them, I mean, they are first responders in many parts of the world, which is not, that isn't a war, it's a first responder kind of thing. There's no reason they couldn't come up with solutions that they could participate in.
Yeah.
Here as well.
Yeah, well, and I think I have a book on my shelf that talks about that, that the way that we treat our environment is as if we're at war against the environment. It's as if we're trying to beat it down. We're trying to defeat it. Yeah, I mean, like when you try to channelize a river, or when you try to, just by brute force, just. I don't know. I guess, to solve a problem, you have to kill it. And what the problem is, we want to live. We want to live in a environment that is worth living in. So anyway, that just I guess it didn't shock me, because after all, I do edit Connections, and I read this stuff all the time. Yeah. But the thing is that it was just galling, and they just treated it like it was as normal as could be, that what we need to do is we have to come up with this 355 ship Navy, just because Donald Trump came up with the number and said, well, I guess that's what we're going to do. We're just going to follow along. And, we have to have more ships to christen, and we have to, keep these people busy, building stuff. And so why don't they just build solar panels? Why can't they build just like windmills? Or
Well, they could put a little more money into diplomacy and State Department.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, we all have a common enemy. I mean, the common enemy is the temperature rising.
Yes.
And so, I mean, it wouldn't be difficult for us to all get together around the same table and say, how are we gonna accomplish this? And it's funny sometimes when you're sitting on the same side of the table with somebody and you're looking at a joint problem, a problem you're trying to solve. Somehow that person doesn't become your enemy anymore. Right. Somehow, you learn how to cooperate. You learn how to figure things out, and you find out that these people aren't so different at all. The thing that makes them different is that we want to take their oil from under their sand, and we want to make money off of it. And so that's what makes them our enemies. Yeah. And it's just I don't know. I mean, maybe I've read Connections too long, but it's just I mean, you just start seeing this so often.
But it was interesting. So back in November when we showed the other climate change film.
And that was what was called?
That was called The Human Element. James Baylog was.
Is that something you can get on Netflix or a documentary or something?
Yeah,
Human Element.
I have a copy of it, and we can loan it out if people need it. But the thing is, we had a really good discussion afterwards. People were talking, and it was an evening meeting, so I had to shut it down at some point, which never happens. Usually it just but it's like, no, I need to go home. But one of the things I asked people to do, that was right before Thanksgiving, talk to your families, talk to people every day, talk to someone about climate change.
Right.
And the response, people are so afraid of talking to their families about climate change. And it's like, well, then don't talk about climate change. Talk about the asthma issue in your community. Talk about the bad air days that we have in our area. There are things that climate change is causing that are already affecting us. And even if you're on opposite sides of fossil fuels, you care about the health of your children.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. I mean, it's really amazing how frightened people are of just changing their habits. But the change that's happening now is what really should be frightening people. If they really noticed what is happening, hottest decade on record, and I'm not, that's only been the last 100 years, but I think they can go back into ice cores or whatever, and you can see that this is a very exceptional 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, there's a graph here that you have CO2, the long view. It looks like from
from way
back from 400,000 years ago. In terms of the parts per million of carbon dioxide, it was 280, then it went down to 180, then it went up to about almost 300, and then down. The 250,000 years ago it went down to 200, and so it's all middling down below 300 until about, it looks like just before the zero, before zero AD, and then it looks like it starts creeping up, and then it just skyrockets from 1950 until now, and it's like a vertical line. From 300 at 1950 to the current level, which is like, I think it's about 420 now.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah. And so it's just, and this is the source is NASA. And so I see years before today. Today was 50. But in any case, it is just astounding that that this can be measured, and to say that somehow that the presidential Freedom Medal winner says that this isn't happening, that humans can't have such an effect on the earth, that that disinformation, that Donald Trump gave a Presidential Medal of Freedom award to Rush Limbaugh, who has been spouting these lies for 30 years, and has given comfort to people to say, oh, I guess I don't have to do anything. I guess it's just it's just a bunch of crazy scientists who are just out there trying to make me have to freeze in the dark. It's just amazing to me that person would actually get an award.
It's sad.
It's sad. So okay. So you have some web pages and Facebook. You have a Facebook page.
Facebook page, yes.
SJC Climate Action.
Yes. So by all means, all of you listeners, please go on our Facebook page. And also join our listserv. Email us through the
very
Facebook
good.
page.
Excellent. Yeah.
We have quite a number of volunteer opportunities and quite a number of projects. And of course, we do not quite a lot of number of projects, but some. And
you'll be out at Earth Day.
And education and advocacy on top of our tree planting and vehicle idling projects. And we've been in existence for 2.5 years, so we're really pretty well established.
Do you have regular meetings when you get together to discuss stuff, or you just go do actions? I mean, you just do tree plantings and go to meetings and talk about like when you went to advocate for the $14 million plan or for the tree planting. So
we're trying to expand our volunteer involvement, right? But mainly right now it's through our affiliated organizations.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a steering committee that meets regularly, and then when a project is there and we put the word out for people to come, we send it out to member organizations to see
Excellent.
If they have people who are interested.
Excellent. And and for us, I mean, if you want to come on out, come on to the Earth Day Coordinating Committee. We're here on Monday, starting on February 24th, going up until the Earth Day, April 26th, and you can see these fine ladies who are going to be out there. You'll probably be with Audubon, and you'll be with Sierra, or you'll be with Climate.
I'll be with Sierra Club.
You'll be with Sierra Club,
and I'll be with the Climate Action Coalition.
Very good, excellent. So so check them out at SJC Climate Action. There's their Facebook page. They're doing some great work, and stay active. Try to learn as much as you can about climate action and pass it on to your friends. So thank you very much, Susan Schreider and Margo Praus. It's been a nice evening.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been lovely.